All right, guys. This is something that I wanted to get out before I left town. I didn't have an opportunity to, but definitely did a lot of work on it in terms of just kind of gathering my thoughts, what I wanted to make sure that everybody understood. But this is going back to the fantastic conversation we were having in the Slack channel. Basically, what I titled this is using heart rate to gauge intensity, and it was really came up whenever we programmed the Burpee Capacity Test. Mark James referenced some really cool research that I dug into as well. I found another really cool website that I'll share with you guys that actually dove into the methodology behind a test. When a study is done, it's really important not to just read the results, but like how they got to those results. What was the population study in terms of who the participants were, what was their background, what tests did they actually do, and then were the results meaningful and applicable, most importantly, to what we're looking to do here. So using heart rate to gauge intensity, this has long been a pretty tried and true axiom in a lot of more traditional sports. Most probably prevalent that I've seen it in is like the endurance community, in particular cycling. Although cycling has really taken this to a whole nother level. That's a different rant for me to go on. Not a bad rant. It's fantastic what they do. They really have it dialed in. From what CrossFit would be considered as like a mixed modal sport. From that application, we don't have it quite as well dialed in as some of the other communities that have been around a lot longer, but we do have enough figured out to make it meaningful for the general population that we're serving. And even the competitors. I do this with Jay. I've done it with him numerous times over the years, and I think he actually did do it, the Burpee Capacity Test, when we did it a couple weeks ago, because I wanted to see where he was at today. What we kind of shoot for when we're doing that test is to find a heart rate that is somewhere in the 130 to 150 beats per minute is ideal. And what we're looking for here is ideal from the sense that they are going to do something that is sustainable for the long term. So we're looking at like that 6 to 8 minute range. You could even argue for a lot of people we're looking at that 3.5 plus minute range. And we'll kind of get into the metabolic pathway thing at the later end. But essentially, like if we're doing an effort like something very explosive, sprinting, 1 rep maxing, that doesn't apply to that. The heart rate is potentially going to be through the roof for that brief period of time, but it is certainly not something that is sustainable. So why do we do this Burpee Capacity Test? We want to find a sustainable, i.e. aerobic pace, so something that somebody can latch onto and know that if they stay within that heart rate, that they're going to be able to maintain whatever that pace in the exercise or that particular movement for the long term. We joke and we talk about Mark James just being an absolute master of this. Well, he's had a lifetime of practice of knowing what his sustainable pace is, and that's why he's so good at those workouts that are, anything basically over like 8 minutes. If it's in his wheelhouse in terms of movements, we know that Mark James, regardless of age, is going to put up one of the best scores in the gym. So how do we do it just from the general population at the gym is through the Burpee Capacity Test. One reason that this got chosen, it's from a training program I dove into years ago called the Outlaw Way, and this is something that we did there with them, and I loved it. The burpee is just one of those movements that seems to, more than probably anything, potentially thrusters being the other thing, is because you're moving such a far distance, your heart rate is traveling, or your heart itself is traveling such a far distance, it has the capability to really jack that heart rate up. So if we can find a sustainable pace through testing our burpees, it stands to reason that anything else that we do, we can also apply that same heart rate ideal to. So the thing that came up in the Slack channel was, well, what about the 220 minus age for estimating your maximal heart rate? Again, Mark James referenced some good studies, and I kind of came in there with a fire hose statement that 220 minus age is actually not a relevant piece of scientific usefulness like a lot of folks think that it is. If you pick up a Men's Health or Muscle and Fitness or something, they will reference this. One thing that we do know about those publications is that just like they are not reliable with actually how to get somebody fit, they are also not using this in its stated intention. So the original intention of the 220 minus age calculation was as a baseline for cardiac rehab patients. So you had these people that would go in, have surgeries on the heart, and they wanted to be ultra conservative in telling them that you do not want to see your heart rate get up over a certain level, and the way that you find that level, what they told their patients to do was take the number 220, subtract your age, and that's the heart rate that we want you to stay at or beneath. The problem is that there is huge variations amongst people when you tell them to do this. Not just for the cardiac rehab patients, because they did find that too, so it kind of still became useless for that group, even though it was intended for them, but that's another conversation. But the reality is that there are huge variations amongst the general population for how unreliable this calculation can be. As much as 20 beats per minute plus or minus on the high side or the low side. I made the comment that I routinely have Jay and Casey, who are 47 and 52 years old respectively, well over 200 beats per minute. Again, they're not sustaining that for 6, 8, 30 minutes, but they are sustaining it for more than just a very short time frame. So it is worth mentioning that. The variations come from a variety of areas, but it can be linked to just your general fitness capacity, your height, your weight, and then probably super important for our application is the specificity of the exercise. So when you go and cycle, your sustainable heart rate is going to be slightly different than when you run or you row or you burpee or you wall ball, thrust or pull up, whatever it is. But it's still worth mentioning is that this is just a general idea of what we're trying to get folks to do. And at the end of the day, what we want folks to kind of understand and learn is what it feels like when you are past the point that it is not sustainable for you. So are there people who can sustain a higher heart rate? Yeah, they're called CrossFit Games athletes, or they're called Tour de France cyclists. But in general, what we've found is that for the general population, all things considered, male, female, height, weight, fitness level, exercise specificity, somewhere in the 130 to 150 range is going to feel, or is going to be a pace that is sustainable. How do you know that it's sustainable for most of the people that are in our gym? Is they're going to feel like they're going way too slow, all right? And that is the very definition of sustainability, is it is going to be too slow if you're doing a 4-minute or maybe even a 6 or 8 minute, because it's designed to be something 20 to 30 plus minutes, maybe even 2 hours like a marathon row. The last thing is that Mark James did reference that Tanaka study. They also found that there was a huge range of variance there, plus or minus, again, 20 beats per minute. But the article that I'm going to share with you guys really wrapped it up very nicely, and it brought me back to a blog that I wrote a few years ago where I was explaining what RPE, or rating of perceived exertion, is. And RPE is based upon a scale from 6 to 20, where when you have people in the exercise lab on a breathing apparatus and a bike of some sort, or some sort of hand or arm ergometer, where they are testing your VO2 max or your max heart rate or something like that, but they needed something easy to track, like, hey dude, how hard are you working? And so they would have this big chart of numbers, 6, 7, 8, all the way to 20, and the participant could literally just point, because they couldn't speak at a certain point, but they could point to a number to kind of correlate how hard do you feel like you're working. All right. Ironically, what they did, the reason they built it from 6 to 20 instead of something 1 through 10 that would seem to make more sense, is that actually correlated what they found with the heart rate that the participant probably had at that point. So if they were going on this thing and they pointed to 11, they could look at the heart rate monitor and the participant was actually at a heart rate of 110. If they pointed to a 15 on this thing, it correlated to a heart rate of about 150. And so the Borg scale is what this RPE is based on, and it's got, I'll link to the blog post that I wrote, but it's got all these things that it feels very easy, moderately easy, tough, moderately hard, very, very, very hard at the 20 range. all right? At the end of the day, though, like I said before, what we're trying to do is give people the sense, the learning capability of what is a heart rate that you can maintain when longer workouts show up. Not just the 6 to 8 minute ones, but the ones that go 12, 15, 18, minutes. Something that we do with people is we tell them if they're in a 5-round workout and round 1 takes them 1 minute, and then they're at 1:35, and then they're at 2:15, and then they're at 3 minutes, like they're not understanding what this is. So you would want to see these intervals be somewhere in the same neighborhood. I'll wrap this up by kind of sharing again what was at the end of that other article that I'll share, is that when it comes to your training, or when you're trying to explain something like this to our clients, here's what you can do. When it's a long workout, your pace should feel easy or comfortable, all right? When it is a moderate time domain, so maybe the 4 to 8 minute range, all right, it should feel like a hard effort. You could not physically maintain that pace. All right, and then something that is very, very short and fast and difficult, your effort, your RPE, or your heart rate, if you want to correlate it with that, should feel very hard. The effort should be hard. So again, this is like this is a measure of effort here. This line, high power output, but a very short time frame, is going to feel very hard, effort-wise. Something that is a little bit less power output, but you can take it for a little bit longer time duration, is going to feel like the effort is hard. And then finally, very, very low power output, but you can sustain it for a long time, is going to feel easy and comfortable. I hope that helps. If you guys have any other questions, let me know. I think that I'm also going to share this with the members because I think that it would be helpful for them as well. But I hope this clarified anything.